You were on a long-haul survey mission. They called it Deep Space Patrol, a rather grand title for cataloging floating rocks and cosmic dust. Your ship, the Stargazer, was a tiny, lonely speck of light. It drifted in an endless sea of quiet darkness. For 6 standard months, your only real companion was the gentle hum of the life support recycler. That and the ship's computer, who you had nicknamed Chip. Mostly because it had all the personality of a potato chip. Every so often, a ping from a distant pulsar would break the monotony. Command called it a ghost signal, a whisper in the void that nobody could explain. Your job was to find its source. You were the lucky soul sent to poke the weird thing with a very long stick. You honestly expected to find a rogue asteroid. Maybe a new gas cloud you could name after your childhood pet, Sir Reginald Fluffington III. You certainly did not expect this. The sensors screamed first, a piercing wail of alarms that shattered the calm. It was a sound no pilot ever wants to hear. You were on the bridge in 5 seconds flat, a personal best. The main view screen showed absolutely nothing out of the ordinary. Just the familiar, majestic blanket of distant stars. But your instruments were throwing a fit. They told a story of gravitational shear, a place where the laws of physics had apparently taken a vacation, a very permanent vacation. Then you saw it with your own eyes. It was not a thing. It was an absence of things, a tear in the very fabric of space itself. It wasn't a hole. It was a wound, a shimmering, inky fracture in reality. It looked like someone had stabbed the universe with a shard of obsidian. It absorbed all light. It radiated a cold that you felt deep in your bones, even through meters of reinforced hull plating and your warmest sweater. This was no star science anomaly. This was fundamentally wrong. This was a violation of everything you knew. Your ship's computer was struggling to keep up. It flashed a series of increasingly unhelpful error messages. Unknown phenomenon, it offered. You almost thanked Chip for the brilliant insight. You eased the Stargazer closer. Every instinct, every bit of your training, screamed at you to turn around, to run as fast as your engines would carry you. But curiosity is a kind of gravity all its own. The tear shimmered before you. It began to pulse with a faint, violet light, like a monstrous, cosmic heartbeat. Something was coming through. Something big. A ship emerged from the darkness. It slid through the rift as smoothly as a knife through silk. It was unlike any vessel you had ever seen or imagined. It was not constructed of metal or plated with ceramic. It looked like it was carved from a single, enormous piece of pearl. Its lines were fluid and graceful. They flowed like water frozen in a moment of perfect motion. It had no visible engines, no weapon ports, no windows that you could see. It was perfectly smooth, utterly, impossibly alien. Your comms crackled with static. You hailed it on every known frequency, from simple radio bursts to complex quantum entanglement signals. There was no reply. The ship simply hung there in the void, a silent testament to a technology that was leagues beyond your own. You felt like you were in a canoe next to an aircraft carrier. Then, a section of its impossibly smooth hull turned transparent. It shifted from pearly white to something clearer than glass. Inside, you saw a control room. And in that control room, you saw a figure. Your screen zoomed in, the image resolving with chilling clarity. The face looking back at you was unnervingly human. It was so human that it made the hair on your arms stand right up. Because it was your face. Or rather, it was a version of your face. Older, tired, and filled with a profound sorrow you could not begin to comprehend. You just stared. Your brain refused to process what your eyes were seeing. It had to be a trick, a deep fake projection, some kind of psychological warfare. You ran a sensor scan on the figure. The readings came back as 100% human. The genetic markers were a near-perfect match for your own. It was you, aged by about 30 years. Lines of worry and loss were carved around familiar eyes. Your expression was impossibly calm. It was a deep, unsettling calm that spoke of storms weathered and tragedy survived. He raised a hand. It was not a greeting. It felt more like an acknowledgement, a sign that he saw you, that he understood your confusion, that he had been waiting for you. Your ship's computer chip chimed again. Its synthesized voice was flat. Unrecognized communication signal detected. Non-standard waveform. It was not radio. It was not a laser. It was something else entirely. And then you felt it. A voice echoed inside your mind. It was not a sound you heard with your ears. It was a feeling, a pure thought that unfolded in your consciousness like a blooming flower. We mean you no harm. We are kin. The message was simple, but it carried the weight of ages. It resonated with a truth you felt deep in your gut, a truth that bypassed all your logic and all your training. You tried to respond. You fumbled with your own comms panel, your fingers suddenly clumsy. You felt like a caveman trying to operate a starship. How do you talk back to a thought? Do you just think really loudly? The thought came again, clearer this time, patient and calm. Your vessel is safe. We ask you to come aboard our ship. There is much to discuss. The fate of our people depends on it. An invitation across time, an invitation from yourself. Your training kicked in immediately. Star Command protocols were very, very clear. Never board an unknown vessel. Never trust an unverified first contact. It was the fastest way to become a cautionary tale told to Academy cadets. But this felt different. This was not an alien. This was family. You looked at the face on the screen, the face that was yours, and you made a decision that would change not just your life, but the course of human history. The docking procedure was, well, there was no procedure. There was no clang of metal, no hiss of equalizing pressure. One moment you were on your own familiar bridge. The next, a shimmering doorway opened. It simply appeared in the middle of your ship, right next to the emergency rations dispenser. It pulsed with a soft, white light. It was a silent invitation. You took a deep breath. You wondered briefly if this was how all bad horror movies started. Then you stepped through. The sensation was like diving into cool, still water. For a single disorienting moment, you felt completely weightless. All sound vanished. Then your feet found a solid floor. You were standing in a corridor. But this corridor was an architectural impossibility. You walked through halls made of solid energy. The walls, floor, and ceiling glowed with a gentle inner light. They shifted and flowed around you like liquid crystal. The air itself hummed with a quiet power. A power you could feel in your teeth. This was not technology as you knew it. Their technology was more like magic than science. Panels of light would brighten as you approached them. They displayed impossibly detailed star charts of galaxies you had never seen. Other panels showed complex equations that twisted and folded into forms of breathtaking art. It was a symphony of information and beauty. A figure waited for you at the end of the hall. It was the older version of you. Up close, the resemblance was even more striking. He wore simple gray robes that seemed to absorb the light around him. His smile was faint and sad. Welcome. The thought entered your mind without any effort at all. We are glad you came. There is someone you must meet." He turned and led you deeper into the heart of the ship. You followed, your own footsteps making no sound on the glowing floor. You had a million questions bubbling up inside you. But you had a feeling that simple questions like, "Who are you?" and "What is going on?" would not be nearly enough. You were led into a vast, circular chamber. The ceiling was a perfect dome of swirling starlight. It was a flawless replica of the night sky. But it was a sky from a time long past. Constellations you only knew from ancient history texts shone brightly above. In the center of the room stood a single, tall figure. It was slender and draped in robes that seemed to be woven from shadow and light itself. It was not the man who looked like you. This being was something else entirely. You had a distinct feeling you were no longer at the top of the food chain. You met their leader, a being of immense age. As you drew closer, you felt the sheer weight of their years. It was a palpable pressure in the air, a static charge of experience and knowledge that made the air thick. 1,000 lifetimes, 1,000,000. It was more than your mind could comfortably process. It felt like standing on the shore of an ocean that stretched into infinity. "Welcome, child of the lost branch," a new voice echoed in your mind. This voice was ancient. It was layered with the whispers of countless others, a chorus of minds singing a single, powerful note. "I am the speaker for my people. You may call me the Elder Ones." The name itself was strange, a plural singular, as if the being was both one and many at the same time. The being turned to face you. There was no face beneath its deep hood. There was only a swirling nebula of soft, silver light, a miniature galaxy of stars and dust where a face should be. You found yourself staring into the heart of a cosmos. They called themselves the progenitors. And you were about to learn that your family tree had some very, very strange branches. The Elder Ones gestured to the star dome above with a long, slender hand. The constellations began to shift and move. They swirled together to tell a story. It was a history written in living starlight. "We are you," the Elder's voice explained, its tone resonating with ancient sorrow. "And you are us. We are one people, sundered by time and a terrible tragedy." The stars formed a familiar spiral galaxy. Then they zoomed in on a single, unremarkable yellow star. A small blue and white planet circled it. Earth, your home. But it was an Earth of the distant, primordial past. The continents were wrong. The ice caps were larger. They told you a story of humanity's true origin. It was a story that shattered everything you thought you knew. Our species did not evolve solely on Earth. We were born among the stars. We were a great, star-born race that had settled 1,000 worlds. Earth was just one of many colonies, one of the most promising, but a colony nonetheless. Our two peoples were separated thousands and thousands of years ago. A great schism occurred. It was not a war, but a philosophical divide over our future. One faction wanted to embrace technology fully, to merge with it, to transcend the fragile limitations of flesh and bone. These were the progenitors. They saw a future of infinite potential. The other faction feared this path. They argued for a natural existence, a life bound to the simple laws of biology. They chose to remain on Earth. They chose to forget their star-born past. They severed all ties to their kin. They called themselves the Anchored. You were a descendant of the Anchored. You were a child of the lost branch of humanity. You were looking at the ghosts of your own future, a future your ancestors had feared and abandoned. You struggled to process the tidal wave of information. Your entire history, a carefully constructed lie. Your species, a self-imposed exile from a galactic heritage. You felt a wave of anger bubble up. It was followed by a deep confusion. Why would they leave? Why abandon their brothers and sisters on Earth to stumble in the darkness? The Elder Ones seemed to sense your turbulent questions. The star dome shifted again. The image of ancient Earth vanished. It was replaced by a swirling, chaotic darkness that seemed to press in on you. We did not leave our shared home by choice. The voice in your head grew somber, laced with an ancient pain. We were driven out. We fled to save what little we could of our culture, of our people. In the darkness on the dome, thousands of pinpricks of light appeared. Each one was a star system, a progenitor world. Then, one by one, they began to go out. They were not winking out like a dying star. They were being erased, swallowed by an aggressive shadow that moved between the stars. A terrible enemy forced them into exile among the stars, an enemy they could not comprehend, let alone defeat. They only had time to run. They retreated into realms beyond normal space. They jumped across dimensions. They hid in the tiny folds of reality itself. They had been hiding ever since. For millennia, they had been watching humanity's slow, painful climb back to the stars. They hoped their ancient enemy would never find the lost branch. They hoped you would be safe. But their hope was in vain. The darkness in the cosmos had a long memory, and it was very, very patient. What is it? You managed to think. The question was not one of curiosity. It was a desperate plea for understanding. The Elder Ones showed you. The dome above became a viewport into hell. It showed a fleet of ships. Except they were not ships. They were more like star-sized insects. Their carapaces were made of a black, non-reflective material that drank the light. They swarmed a vibrant progenitor world, a planet teeming with billions of souls. This enemy consumes entire civilizations for fuel. You watched in mute horror as the swarm descended. They did not use lasers or missiles. Their methods were far more profane. They latched onto the planet's surface. Great, continent-sized drills bored into the crust. They were drinking the planet's molten core, siphoning its very life force like a parasite. The beautiful cities of the progenitors crumbled into dust. Their deep blue oceans boiled away into steam. The entire world was reduced to a cold, dead husk in a matter of hours. This was the Great Devourer, a star-born plague that moved from galaxy to galaxy. It left a trail of dead worlds and silent systems in its wake. It was not just a fleet. It was a single, hive-minded consciousness. Its only purpose was to consume, to feed, to grow. And after millennia of searching, it had found the faint trail of its old prey. It followed the scent back to its source, back to the origin system. Now it has found its way back to Earth. The Elder's message was a chilling final note. The first wave is already on its way. They will reach your sun in a matter of standard weeks. The image of the Devourer faded from the dome. You were left in the quiet chamber, standing under the silent, ancient starlight. The full, crushing weight of your situation settled upon you. It was a cold, heavy thing in your chest. Earth was not ready. Humanity was a fledgling species. We had just learned to walk among the stars. We were children playing with toy rockets in a sandbox. And a monster was coming to that sandbox. You were completely, utterly outmatched. The progenitors had fought the Devourer for centuries with their godlike technology. And they had lost. What hope did humanity possibly have? The Elder Ones turned its non-face toward you. We cannot fight this battle for you. The voice was firm, but not unkind. Our presence here would only draw the full swarm. The great devourer would come with all its might. It explained that their very energy signature, the power that ran their ships and their civilization, was a beacon. It was the scent the devourer hunted. But you, the lost branch, you were different. Your technology was primitive. Your energy signature was pathetically faint. You were almost invisible to the devourer's senses. You were the perfect ghost in the machine, a joke with a universe-sized punchline. The progenitors can give humanity the tools to fight. They offered to share their knowledge, the secrets of their energy, the designs for their weapons, the theories behind their defenses. They could upload it all directly into your ship's computers in a single, compressed file. They could give you the sword you needed to slay the dragon. But their help comes with a grave warning, a warning delivered with the solemnity of a death sentence. Our power is not without its cost, the Elder Ones cautioned. It is a fire that can forge a new future, or burn your civilization to ash. What is the cost? You thought, dreading the answer. You knew it would not be simple. You were right. This was not some simple technology. It was not a blueprint for a better engine or a stronger hull. The Elder Ones explained the nature of their power. It was psionic. It was based entirely in consciousness. Their ships were not just machines. They were alive. They were symbiotic extensions of the crew's own will. Their power is drawn from the minds of their ancestors. Every single progenitor was linked together in a vast collective consciousness, a psychic network of minds stretching back thousands of generations. When they fought, they did not just draw on a reactor core for energy. They drew on the combined mental energy of their entire history. They called it the Echo, a literal reservoir of souls. This was the power they were offering you, a way to tap into a force beyond your mortal understanding. But humanity did not have an echo. You had no great reservoir to draw from. You would have to create your own. To use their power is to sacrifice a part of your own spirit. Each time a human pilot would use this gift, a piece of their consciousness would be given to the network. Their memories, their emotions, their very soul would be woven into the weapon's fire. They would become a permanent part of the Echo. They would become the ghosts that powered the machine for the next generation. It was a terrible, beautiful form of immortality, a legacy built on the ultimate sacrifice. You would not just be asking soldiers to die for their world. You would be asking them to become the immortal weapons that defended it, forever. The progenitors fell silent. The great chamber was filled only with the soft light of the star dome. They had told you everything, the history, the enemy, the offer, the cost. The rest was up to you. You were given the choice to accept their gift for humanity. You, a single survey pilot, on a routine mission to chart a stellar anomaly. You had left your home port expecting months of quiet solitude and bad freeze-dried coffee. Now you held the fate of your entire species in your hands. It was a cruel joke on a cosmic scale. The universe apparently had a very dark sense of humor. You were not a leader. You were not a politician or a great general. You were just a person who was very, very far from home and in way over their head. The decision felt too heavy for one person to bear. It felt like trying to lift a planet. If you said no, you condemned billions to a horrible, meaningless death. They would be consumed by the devourer, erased from existence without ever knowing what was happening. If you said yes, you were introducing a power that could fundamentally change humanity forever. a power that fed on the very essence of its users. What would your people become? What kind of society would be built upon such a terrible foundation? You looked at the elder ones. Its swirling, star-filled face offered no judgment, no guidance. The choice had to be yours. It was the ultimate test, a test for the lost branch. Were you worthy of your star-born heritage? You gave them your answer. You returned to your ship with impossible knowledge weighing you down. The journey back through the glowing corridors was a blur. The older version of you escorted you to the shimmering doorway. He placed a hand on your shoulder, not a physical touch, but a mental one, a feeling of shared sorrow, and a tiny, fragile glimmer of hope. The data is in your ship's core, he thought to you. The choice remains with your people, but you have given them a chance. That is more than we ever had. The doorway closed behind you. You were back on the bridge of the Stargazer. It felt small and cramped. It felt primitive, a museum piece held together with hope and duct tape. For a long moment, you just stood there. The silence of the cockpit pressed in on you. The progenitor's ship was gone. The rift in space had sealed itself, leaving no scar. There was no evidence that any of it had ever happened, except for a new file in your ship's computer core. A file that glowed with a soft, internal light on your console. It was a key, a weapon, a poison. You did not know which. The silence of space felt different now. It was no longer empty. It was full of threats. You knew what was out there. You knew about the things that hunt in the dark. And you knew about the family you had just met. The family that had been watching over you for centuries. You set a course for home. The longest journey of your life was about to begin. The trip back to Star Command felt like an eternity. Every jump through the strange non-space of hyperspace was filled with a gnawing anxiety. You rehearsed your report 1,000 times. You tried to find a way to phrase it that did not sound completely insane. You failed every single time. You imagined the looks on their faces, the skepticism, the pity. You were not wrong. You delivered the warning to your command. You stood in the main briefing room on Earth Station 1. A massive hollow screen displayed the faces of the top admirals. They looked stern, impatient, and deeply annoyed that you had broken protocol and radio silence on your way back. You told them everything. The rift, the progenitors, the shared ancestry, the great devourer, and the gift, the terrible gift, waiting in your ship's computer. They saw your story as a delusion or a clever trap. Admiral Thorne, a man whose face looked like it was carved from granite and disappointment, cut you off. "Pilot," he said, his voice dripping with condescension, "have you undergone a full psych evaluation recently? Because it sounds like space madness has finally claimed one." The others were no better. Some accused you of fabricating the story for fame. Others suggested the progenitors were liars, a hostile alien species using a clever trick, a Trojan horse designed to cripple Earth's defenses. They refused to even look at the data file. They quarantined your ship. They grounded you indefinitely. You were confined to your quarters, pending a full debriefing and a board of inquiry, which was military speak for, "Sit here and think about what you've done." You were a prophet of doom. And like all prophets, you were ignored. You screamed. You pleaded. You begged them to just look at the star charts the progenitors gave you. They showed the enemy's exact path, its precise arrival time. They just patted you on the shoulder and told you to get some rest. You spent 3 agonizing weeks in confinement. 3 weeks of watching the clock on your wall terminal, watching the date get closer and closer to the one the progenitors had given you. You felt like a character in a bad tragedy, the lone, sane person in a world that had gone completely mad. You tried to leak the data, but they had locked you out of every system. You were a prisoner, a Cassandra screaming into the uncaring void. Then the day came. The day the progenitors had warned you about. You were sitting in your sterile white room, watching a public news feed. It showed live images from the Saturn system. The beautiful, majestic rings were a symbol of cosmic peace. Not today. A shadow fell over Saturn's rings. It was not an eclipse. It was a fleet. Hundreds of black, insect-like ships. They dropped out of hyperspace in perfect, terrifying formation. The enemy had arrived, right on schedule. Panic erupted. On the news feed, seasoned anchors were stammering. Experts were shouting nonsense. Nobody knew what these things were, where they came from, what they wanted. But you knew. Every ship in the system that engaged them was destroyed instantly. Our weapons had no effect. The Devourer's ships simply absorbed the energy blasts. They swarmed our orbital stations. They began to feed. It was just as the Elder Ones had shown you. The first wave was here, and humanity was throwing rocks at a tidal wave. Suddenly, your door hissed open. Admiral Thorne stood there. His face was pale. The arrogance was gone. It had been replaced by a cold, stark fear. "You," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "You have to tell us how to fight them." You were rushed back to the main briefing room. The atmosphere had changed completely. The calm, bureaucratic authority was gone. It was replaced by a barely controlled chaos. Every screen showed the same horrifying images. The Devourer fleet cutting through Earth's defenses like they were made of paper. They were ignoring our warships entirely. They were making a direct, unwavering line for Earth. The admirals who had scorned you now looked at you with raw desperation in their eyes. They were ready to listen. They unlocked the progenitor file from your ship's computer. The data flooded their systems. Blueprints for impossible weapons unfolded on the main screen. Designs for psionic shields that bent space-time. And the terrible, unavoidable truth about how it was all powered. The room fell silent. The shouting stopped. They understood the cost. They understood the sacrifice they would have to ask of their pilots, their children, their friends. Admiral Thorne looked at you, his face a mask of anguish. His eyes asked the question for everyone in the room. Is it worth it? Can we do this? Humanity must now choose its fate. The choice was no longer yours alone. It belonged to everyone. The leaders, the soldiers, the people who would have to become living weapons to save their world. To survive, they would have to change the very definition of what it meant to be human. They would have to embrace a future their ancestors had rejected. Do you trust the ghosts of your own future? The question hung in the air of the silent room. The Devourer fleet drew closer, and the clock was ticking.